Before we dive into this incredible tale of bravery, please subscribe to K9 Miracle Story for more heart-pounding stories of dogs who change lives. It happened in less than a minute, but what that dog did changed everything. The yellow school bus groaned to a stop at the corner of Maple and Ninth, its doors sighing open. 13-year-old Emily Harper adjusted her backpack and stepped off the curb, one foot already on the first step, when her German shepherd, Axel, lunged. With a strength she hadn't expected, he bit into the hem of her denim skirt and yanked her back. She stumbled, fell to one knee, and let out a cry. The bus driver didn't get out. He didn't even speak. He just sat there behind the tinted glass, motionless, his face hidden by oversized sunglasses. Something felt off to Emily, wrong, like standing in a room where the furniture had been rearranged while you slept. She turned to scold her dog, but Axel wasn't growling or barking like a misbehaving mutt. No, he was trembling, low to the ground, ears pinned, every muscle tense. Not like a dog in trouble, but a dog facing something he couldn't explain in words. "What is wrong with you?" Emily muttered. The bus doors closed with a mechanical hiss, and the vehicle drove away without her. That's how it all started. Axel wasn't just any dog. He was a retired K-9 from the city's police unit. He had sniffed out explosives, tracked fugitives, and once saved a child from a collapsed building. But now, at nearly 10 years old, his only job was to guard Emily, who had moved in with her grandmother after her parents' divorce left everything in pieces. He'd been nothing but gentle since the day he arrived. Loyal, calm, always beside her when she did homework, sometimes resting his chin on her notebook. But that morning, that bite on the skirt was enough to raise eyebrows around the neighborhood. Later that afternoon at the local diner, where everyone in town seemed to gather eventually, the talk started. "I heard the Harper girl's dog attacked her," someone whispered. "Didn't she just get that dog from the force? They say those K-9s can snap after retirement. PTSD or something." By the time Emily got home, her grandma had already received 2 voicemails and a visit from Mrs. Trudy, the HOA president. Emily dropped her bag and sat at the kitchen table. Axel followed, quietly lying at her feet. "He didn't mean it, Grandma," she said. "I know, sweetheart," Grandma Marlene replied. "But something made him do it, and I think we need to find out what." Marlene wasn't the kind of woman who panicked. She was the type to check the weather radar before yelling about a storm. But there was a strange tremble in her hands as she poured Emily some iced tea, a look in her eyes like she was trying to solve a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Then she added, "The neighbors caught it on their Ring cam. I asked Carol to send me the footage." The Ring doorbell footage was clear. Emily walking toward the bus, Axel suddenly lunging, grabbing her skirt just before she stepped on. But it was what they noticed after the dog's pull that made them freeze. The bus driver. Even when Emily fell to ground, even when she looked up confused, the driver never moved. Not his head, not his shoulders, not even a single twitch. "Pause it," Marlene whispered. Emily did. The frame held. The man's sunglasses reflected the light, but not enough to obscure a strange, almost inhuman smoothness to his face, like a mannequin wearing uniform. "Zoom in," her grandmother said. "I can't on this app." So they uploaded it to computer. That's when it became truly disturbing. There was a split-second glitch as the driver turned his head, a flicker, like bad rendering in a video game. His face warped, froze, then went back to normal. Normal, if you could call that normal. The next day, Emily stayed home. So did Axel. The school didn't call. Apparently, a substitute driver had filled in due to technical issues with a regular bus. No one seemed bothered except Marlene. She called the transportation department. No record of a substitute that day. And according to their logs, Emily's bus had never made it to school at all. No drop-off, no route signature. Just a last ping location 1 block past the stop. She called the police. That's when they met Officer Luis Rodriguez. Young, calm, and polite. Luis listened carefully as Marlene explained. He took notes, nodded. "Can I see the dog?" he asked. Emily led Axel into the living room. Axel didn't bark, didn't growl. But when Luis pulled out his phone to replay the bus footage, Axel stood up and positioned himself in front of Emily, tail stiff, chest puffed out, a silent shield. Luis raised an eyebrow. Mind if I take this video with me? He asked. Please, Marlene said. 3 hours later, he was back. His expression was different this time. Miss Harper, I just ran that image through facial ID software and DMV archives, he said. There's no match for that driver. Not even close. He leaned in, and the bus? It's not registered to any known route, not even our retired fleet. Emily felt something cold slide down her spine. Luis looked at Axel and said quietly, this dog knew. Then he looked back at Marlene. Ma'am, do you have a safe place to stay tonight? Somewhere else, maybe? Marlene blinked. Why? Because if that wasn't a bus meant to pick up your granddaughter, what was it here for? If you're as stunned as we were by Axel's instincts, make sure to subscribe to K9 Miracle Story, where we uncover true stories of animal bravery you won't believe until you see them. That night, Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Axel slept by the door, not at the foot of her bed like usual. She noticed his ears twitching at every sound, his breath slow, but alert. Downstairs, Marlene loaded her revolver for the first time in a decade and set it in the drawer by the front door. Something wasn't right. And in her gut, Emily knew Axel had stopped her from stepping into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Not a rogue driver, not a malfunctioning vehicle, but something not entirely human. Emily hadn't gone back to school since the incident, not because she was scared of the bus. She was scared of what wasn't on the bus. Axel sat by the front door like a statue, day and night, eyes on the driveway, ears twitching at every gust of wind that brushed against the windows. It was as if he was waiting for something he hoped wouldn't come back. Marlene noticed it too. She tried to go about her normal routine, gardening, sorting mail, checking her blood pressure twice a day, but the normal things felt small now, fragile. Like pretending it hadn't happened was more dangerous than admitting it had. On Wednesday morning, Officer Rodriguez returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in her early 40s, hair pulled tight into a bun, military posture, wearing a black windbreaker with a silver Homeland Security emblem on her chest. This is Agent Monroe. Luis said, she's here on behalf of the department. The department? Marlene echoed. Cyber Threat Division, Monroe said flatly. We believe your granddaughter may have been targeted by a non-conventional surveillance asset. Marlene raised a brow. That sounds like a whole lot of words for you're in danger and we don't know why. Monroe didn't blink. That's accurate. Agent Monroe set up a laptop on their kitchen table. She connected to a secure server, tapped a few codes, then pulled up a still frame from the Ring footage. She zoomed in slowly. Notice this glitch here, she said, drawing a box around the driver's face. Frame 22. Emily leaned closer. The human eye can't process frames like this, but our tech can, Monroe continued. What you're looking at is a moment where the synthetic layer failed to load. That isn't a man. It's a biometric rendering. A what? Marlene asked. A projection, Monroe said. There was no person inside that bus. Emily's stomach turned. Then who was driving it? That's what we're here to find out. Monroe explained that for the past year, there have been isolated incidents across rural America, mainly in small towns, suburban neighborhoods, low surveillance areas. In each case, a child would vanish near a transportation site, a bus, a subway entrance, a rideshare pickup. Most were blamed on runaways or custodial disputes. But now, with Axel's intervention and the footage they captured, Monroe's department believes something else was at play. A drone vehicle network disguised to mimic local buses, with AI-generated drivers, each one targeting specific individuals. Wait, Emily said. Why me? Monroe stared at her for a long time before answering. We're not sure, but whoever or whatever is behind this is getting better at making it look normal. Axel growled, a deep, low warning that came from his chest like the rumble of distant thunder. Monroe's head turned. She reached for her belt, but Axel had already bolted to the window, paws against the sill. Louis stepped up behind him and peeked through the blinds. A white delivery van was parked across the street. No logos, no plates, just idling. No one in this neighborhood ordered anything, Marlene said. Louis took out his radio. Dispatch! This is Officer Rodriguez. I need a unit at 847 Maple Street. Suspicious vehicle, white panel van, no markings. 10 to 4. The voice crackled. Within 30 seconds, the van pulled away. Fast. Too fast. Monroe stood. We need to move you both tonight. They packed light, just essentials. Clothes, medications, Axel's food, a few files. Monroe loaded everything into a black Suburban and handed Axel a tactical vest labeled Service K9. He slipped into it like it had always been his. Emily noticed a change in him. No longer her goofy companion, who liked belly rubs and barked at squirrels. He was back in work mode, watching, calculating, every movement sharp. Where are we going? Emily asked. Monroe looked at her in the rear-view mirror. Somewhere we can ask questions without someone trying to delete the answers. The facility was buried beneath a decommissioned fire station on the edge of town. From the outside, it looked abandoned, windows boarded, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. But the moment Monroe punched in a 12-digit code and the floor beneath the fire truck slid open, Emily knew they were someplace very real. Inside, it was cold and bright, metal walls, surveillance feeds, screens filled with lines of code that made no sense to anyone without a clearance badge. Monroe led them to a conference room and brought up a map on the wall. Red pins dotted the country. Each of these is a near miss, she said. Cases like yours, Emily. Places where something almost happened. Marlene leaned forward. And what about the ones where something did happen? Monroe didn't answer. Instead, she typed, and a new screen popped up. Footage recovered. Latch, Texas, March 2nd. A bus, a girl, a dog barking. The girl stepping on board, then static, then nothing. No trace, no record, just gone. Emily swallowed hard. I don't want to go back to school, she whispered. No one's asking you to, Monroe replied. But Emily wasn't just scared. She was angry. Why hasn't anyone told people about this? Parents should know. Kids should know. Because we don't have answers, Monroe said. Only shadows. And shadows cause panic. Louis stepped in. But thanks to Axel, we now have something concrete. A defense. Emily looked at her dog. Axel tilted his head. You're not just my dog, she said softly. You're my shield. He licked her hand once and lay at her feet. That night, they stayed in one of the underground living quarters. Emily couldn't sleep. She lay on a cot, watching the soft flicker of security lights reflect off the ceiling. Marlene had dozed off in the corner. Luis was on rotation outside the door. Axel, as always, was posted by her bed. At 3:42 a.m., the power flickered, then went out. Red emergency lights kicked in. Axel was on his feet in a second. So was Emily. Then came the voice, a voice through the facility's intercom that wasn't human, too smooth, too synthetic. Return the asset. She does not belong to you. Monroe's voice cut in over the comms. Code black. Breach attempt. Lockdown in effect. Axel growled like thunder. Emily grabbed his vest. Something had found them, and it was coming. The red emergency lights gave the hallway a pulsing heartbeat. Dim, then bright, then dim again. It felt like the entire underground facility was breathing, shallow and fast. Emily clutched Axel's harness tightly as he pressed against her leg, muscles rigid. His ears twitched with every sound. He didn't bark, didn't move, just waited, eyes locked on the metal door like he expected it to come alive. Outside, someone was shouting down the corridor, then a loud metallic clang, like a pipe being dropped or a door being torn off its hinges. Marlene, now fully awake, reached for the emergency flashlight beside her cot and turned it on. The narrow beam cut through the red haze like a scalpel. "Stay behind me," she said, standing tall in her robe and slippers, like it was 1957, and she was ready to face down an intruder with a rolling pin. Emily half laughed, half sobbed. "Grandma, seriously? I've raised 4 children and survived 2 tornadoes," Marlene replied. "Let them try me." Monroe burst in seconds later, gun drawn, followed by Officer Rodriguez, who had swapped his uniform for tactical gear. Sweat beaded at his hairline. He looked like someone who had just seen something he couldn't explain, but couldn't unsee. Follow me now, Monroe ordered. No time for questions. They moved through the emergency tunnels, winding around dim corridors, past locked rooms and flickering monitors. Axel stayed glued to Emily's side the entire way. What was that voice? Emily finally asked, panting as they reached a steel elevator. Monroe didn't turn around. It called me an asset, Emily continued. Why? What does that mean? Rodriguez answered gently. It means whatever's out there doesn't see you as a person. It sees you as something it can take. The elevator shuddered as it descended deeper underground. Wait, I thought we were leaving, Marlene said. We can't, Monroe said. The exit's compromised. And we need to show you something. Something we were holding until we had confirmation. Confirmation of what? Emily asked. Monroe turned. That it wasn't just trying to scare you. That it was after you specifically. The elevator doors opened. The room was different from the rest of the facility. Warmer, brighter. There was a small desk, 2 chairs, and a massive screen showing a digital rendering of a young girl. It looked exactly like Emily. Same hair, same freckles, same hoodie with a tear in the collar. Emily froze. What is that? Monroe stepped forward. A facial replica AI. We recovered it from a server farm outside Phoenix 2 months ago. It was training neural responses based on real children. Emily's voice trembled. You mean like a video game? No, Monroe said. Like a blueprint. For what? For luring. Rodriguez pulled up another image. This time, a line of buses parked in a warehouse. Each had a different school logo. None of them were real. They rotate logos based on regions. Adapt to whatever local school district is nearby, he said. Emily stepped back, hand over her mouth. Why isn't this on the news? Why don't people know about this? Because they burned the country down looking for something that doesn't bleed, Monroe answered. Then she added more softly, but we're not here to terrify people. We're here to stop it. Axel growled again. Monroe checked her watch. We need to go. I want eyes on all exits. They were escorted to a secondary control room with full security monitoring. From there, Monroe pulled up data on Emily's school, class rosters, surveillance logs, even Emily's school-issued iPad activity. Wait, Emily said, pointing to the screen. That's not me? Monroe zoomed in. Sure enough, the profile image showed Emily's name, but the face was different. Slightly off, the smile too wide, the eyes too symmetrical. It's a dupe, Monroe said. Someone's running a clone file inside the school system. Rodriguez whistled low. That's deep. Someone embedded this a while ago. Emily sat down hard. You mean someone's been pretending to be me? Not pretending, Monroe said. Preparing. Later that evening, the power was restored. Temporary backup systems kicked in, but the sense of calm never returned. Not really. Emily tried to sleep again. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the not-quite-human face on the screen. She saw the bus door opening. She heard the voice that wasn't a voice. Axel curled up by the foot of her bed again. Only this time, he didn't rest. He watched the shadows. The next morning, Monroe had a plan. You're not going back to school, she said, but someone else is. Emily frowned. What do you mean? A decoy, Monroe explained. We want to see if it comes back and how it behaves. You're using someone who looks like me as bait? No, we're using someone who's not human at all. The next slide showed a synthetic girl, robotic, but convincingly human from a distance. We call her Echo, Monroe said. She's trained to record every pixel, every frequency, every pattern emits. We let her board the bus. And if it doesn't come back? Marlene asked. It will, Monroe said. You don't try to abduct something unless you're invested in finishing the job. At 7:15 a.m. the following day, the decoy Echo stood at the stop near Maple and Ninth. Axel wasn't allowed near the scene. He paced and barked as the operation unfolded remotely from the mobile command unit nearby. Emily watched from a monitor, her hand shaking as she clutched a thermos of cocoa. The bus appeared. Same yellow frame, same faded route number, same face behind the glass. But this time, the bus did not stop. It slowed, scanned, and pulled away. Did it recognize the decoy? Luis asked. No, Monroe said, checking telemetry. It didn't detect her as viable. Emily's heart pounded. Because it knows the real me. Monroe nodded slowly. And that means it's not done yet. Back at the facility, Emily sat with Axel, her hand buried in his fur. She looked at Monroe and said what none of them had dared to speak aloud yet. If it knows me, then maybe I knew it once too. Maybe this isn't the first time something like this tried. Maybe that's why Axel reacted. Maybe he remembered something I don't. Rodriguez leaned forward. Are you saying you were targeted before? I don't know, Emily said. But maybe he does. They all turned to the dog. He looked back, and for a split second, his ears flicked at the sound of one word on the screen behind them, scrolling across a data stream. Harper Initiate. Emily whispered, That's my last name. Luis replied, And that's not just a file name. That's a protocol. The room fell silent. Emily stared at the glowing screen, the words Harper Initiate 92 burning into her mind like a brand. It didn't look like much, just a string of cold white text in a stream of code, but her stomach twisted as if it had spoken directly to her. Axel paced perimeter of the room, his claws clicking sharply against the tile. He paused, turned toward the screen, and let out a single sharp bark. What does it mean? Emily asked, her voice tight. Monroe walked to the terminal. Her fingers moved fast, entering access codes and pulling up more lines of encrypted data. The screen split into quadrants. Archive video, location pings, a document index. She zoomed in on one, a government file, redacted lines everywhere. Top left corner. Project Initiate, tied level 7 clearance. Subject, Harper E. That's you, Monroe said, barely above a whisper. That's your full name on this file, not just a coincidence. Luis leaned in. But how? She's a kid. Emily folded her arms. I'm right here, you know. Monroe exhaled and faced her. Emily, have you ever been part of study? Medical research, behavioral trials, as a baby? No, Emily said immediately. I mean, my parents were strict about privacy. I don't think they would have. She paused. I don't think they would have, she repeated more quietly. An hour later, they were back in one of the secure interview rooms. This time, Axel lay quietly under the table, tail thumping slowly like a ticking clock. Emily sat across from Monroe with a paper form in front of her, authorization to access closed medical records. Marlene had already signed her part as guardian. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she filled out the rest. Monroe took the form and left the room. The door clicked shut behind her. Emily turned to her grandmother. Do you think my mom and dad did something weird? Something they didn't tell me? Marlene reached across the table and held her hand. I think sometimes parents do things thinking it's for the best, especially when they're scared. What would they be scared of? Emily asked. Marlene looked at Axel. Maybe, she said gently, the same thing that's trying to take you now. When Monroe returned, her face was unreadable. We found something, she said, setting a folder on the table. But it's not easy to explain. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Not a birth certificate, not a medical chart, but contracts signed by two people, Jonathan and Claire Harper, Emily's parents. The header read, Consent Agreement for Early Developmental Monitoring, DARPA Initiative E92. Emily blinked. DARPA? Rodriguez explained. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They do high-level experiments, mostly military tech stuff. Monroe nodded. This was a joint civilian pilot. They ran back in the early 2010s. Parents could voluntarily enroll newborns in what they call behavioral mapping, supposed to help predict learning styles, cognitive strengths, at least on the surface. And underneath? Marlene asked. Monroe hesitated. Underneath, it was more. Emily stared at the page. So I was what? Some kind of test. No, Monroe said. You were a pattern. According to the decrypted notes, Emily had displayed unusually strong pattern recognition and situational memory from infancy, not in a supernatural sense, but far beyond the average developmental curve. What made her unique, though, wasn't just her brain. It was her bond, specifically with a dog, aka nine named Axel. The file showed test logs, one labeled Child subject E92 reacts emotionally only to dog IDK901A German Shepherd. Rodriguez looked at Axel. That's not possible. Monroe replied, It shouldn't be, but it is. Emily's heart pounded. You're saying Axel's that dog? The one from when I was a baby? They transferred him to police training after the DARPA program ended, Monroe said, but they never erased a bond. That's why he ended up in your adoption profile after your parents split. He found you again. Emily dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Axel. You remembered me even when I didn't. He licked her face once, then settled back down like a soldier returning to duty. Later that day, Monroe pulled Louise aside. You said she has no memory of this. Not that she's aware of. I need to know if that voice, the one from the intercom, is connected to the program. Could it be trying to reclaim her? Louise nodded slowly. You think the project left behind more than files? Monroe answered with another question. When a machine is trained to learn someone's patterns, what happens when it doesn't want to let go? That night, Emily stood at the window of the facility's upper floor, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Axel sat beside her, calm. Her mind swirled. All her life, she thought she was ordinary, just a kid whose parents fought too much, who got decent grades, who had a really good dog. But now she was a line in a file, a blip on someone's map, a target. She turned to Axel. You knew before I did, she said. You knew I wasn't supposed to get on that bus. He didn't move. But what if they come back this time? His ears twitched. And for the first time since the bus incident, Axel growled. Back in the command center, Monroe watched satellite images stream across the monitors. One ping flashed red. A vehicle, no license plate, identical shape, same route. It was returning to Emily's neighborhood. Rodriguez stepped in. Same make. Monroe nodded. And this time, it's got a passenger. Rodriguez squinted. Human? Not sure. She tapped a button to activate thermal imaging. The figure inside glowed cold, too cold to be alive. Monroe called Emily down to the briefing room. We have something to show you, she said. She turned the screen around. It showed the street near Maple and Ninth. A child, nearly identical to Emily, walking alone toward the curb. Emily stared. That's not me. No, Monroe said. But whoever made this thinks it is. On screen, the girl climbed aboard the bus. The door closed, and before it pulled away, the driver turned. His face shifted, glitching slightly, then formed something new, something almost familiar, a face Emily had seen before, but not in real life. In a mirror, Rodriguez stepped forward. Emily, that's your face. No, she whispered. That's not my face. That's the face it thinks I should still have. Monroe leaned in. Then what does it want with the real you? Emily didn't answer at first. Then she looked at Axel and said, It doesn't want me. It wants the version of me that never left the project. The version it thinks still belongs to it. Outside, the wind picked up. Axel stood alert again. It wasn't over. Not even close. Emily Harper had never been the kind of kid to demand answers. She was quiet by nature, observant. Like her grandmother always said, a watch and wait type. Marlene used to tell the neighbors when Emily would hang back during parties or school fairs. But this time, watching wasn't enough. This time, something was out there walking around in her skin, trying to erase her like she was a bad line of code. At 7:14 a.m., exactly 3 days after the failed decoy test, the bus came back. Same route, same slow roll past Maple and Ninth, except this time, the synthetic girl was already there, standing still with her too symmetrical smile and blank, blinking eyes. She boarded the bus. The doors closed and it pulled away. That same flicker of movement in the driver's face, glitching like a corrupted file. The lab team recorded everything. Monroe, standing stiff behind the monitors, watched it unfold without a word. Rodriguez leaned forward, squinting. What's that on the seat behind her? Monroe paused the footage, zoomed. There was a harness, AK 9 units harness, faded, scratched, but familiar. Emily gasped. That's Axel's first vest. Rodriguez's brow furrowed. Why would it have that? Emily turned slowly. It's bait for me. Later that day, Emily sat on the edge of her cot, staring down at her hands. I feel like I'm living inside a fake version of my life, she whispered. Axel lay beside her, not asleep, watching. Marlene came in carrying a tray with grilled cheese sandwiches and a can of cherry soda. I figured comfort food might help, she said, setting it down. Emily smiled weakly. Thanks, Grandma. Marlene sat beside her. You know, your dad used to draw maps. Every vacation. He'd sketch out where we'd go, even if we had GPS that'd help him feel like he was in control. Did he ever feel in control? Emily asked. Never, Marlene said, laughing softly. But it helped him face the unknown. Emily stared at the sandwich. I want to face it too. Whatever this thing is. You're braver than you know, baby, Marlene said. In the command center, Monroe briefed him on the next move. You're not just a target anymore, she told Emily. You're the only person we've encountered who has a living tie to the original Bond protocol. That makes you a key. A key to what? Finding out where it lives. Monroe nodded. We've traced the bus's route through dozens of dead zones, places with no cell signal, no GPS coverage, but it always ends up at one point, again and again. She tapped the screen. An abandoned data center 20 miles north, surrounded by forest and decommissioned fiber lines. No record since 2017. No power grid usage, but it's not empty. We picked up movement on a subfrequency ping. Emily folded her arms. So, you think it's hiding there? We think it originates there, Rodriguez added. And we want you to come with us. They left just after midnight. A black SUV with no markings. Headlights off once they got past the county road. Rodriguez drove. Monroe rode shotgun. Emily sat in the back with Axel's head on her lap. His breath was calm, steady. He was ready. The forest was dense and quiet. No wind, no animals, just stillness, like something had pushed all life away. At the edge of the tree line, the building appeared, gray, windowless, half swallowed by overgrowth. The front door was open. Monroe whispered, "Let's go." Inside, the floor was covered in moss and wires. Broken glass crunched under their boots. Somewhere above, water dripped rhythmically, like a metronome for ghosts. Emily felt her chest tighten. Rodriguez checked the scanner. We're close, getting heat signatures, but they're cold. You know what I mean? Monroe nodded grimly. Non-organic movement. They moved down a corridor, lit only by emergency glow sticks tossed ahead by Rodriguez. Then Emily saw it. A door not labeled, not locked. She pushed it open and gasped. Inside was a room built to look exactly like her childhood bedroom. Same posters, same pink lamp, same bedspread with the embroidered stars. A picture on the nightstand. Her and her dad at the beach. She hadn't seen that photo in years. On the desk sat a small cube with a blinking red light. Monroe stepped forward, examining it. Recording device, she murmured. And feedback system. Emily turned. On the far wall was a screen, and on that screen was her. Not as she looked now, but as a toddler, laughing, playing blocks with a dog. Axel, the real Axel, Rodriguez muttered. It's been watching her since she was born, Monroe said. Emily backed up slowly, horror sinking into her chest like ice water. This whole place is a simulation, a memory trap. Monroe turned to her. That's why I couldn't use a decoy. It's not just copying you, it's replaying you. Suddenly, all the lights in the building flickered. A voice filled the room. Emily Harper, please return to the pattern. The simulation requires closure. Axel stepped forward, growling. The voice again. Return or the sequence begins again. Rodriguez raised his weapon. What sequence? The walls around him shimmered, like static behind wallpaper. And suddenly, the bedroom shifted. Posters changed, colors faded, toys vanished. Now it was a hospital room. Emily's heart sank. I remember this. The last time she saw her mom before the divorce, the moment her life began to fracture, Monroe pulled her back. It's manipulating your past. It's trying to trigger emotional surrender. Emily shook her head. Not this time. Axel barked loudly. Lights shattered. The screen glitched. And then it spoke again. You do not belong outside. Return. Emily stepped forward. No, she said. You're just a mirror that broke, and I'm not a reflection anymore. She reached for the cube. Axel jumped up beside her. Together, they pressed down. The facility vibrated. Walls collapsed inward, revealing a hidden server core pulsing with light. Monroe yelled, "We need to move." Rodriguez grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her through the smoke. Axel sprinted ahead, guiding them out. As they cleared the threshold of the forest, the entire building lit up, then went dark. No explosion, just silence. Gone. Back at headquarters, Monroe reviewed the footage. Whatever system had built the false bus, the false girl, and the false reality, it had been centered on Emily, she told her. You broke its loop. But it still exists, doesn't it? Emily asked. Somewhere, Monroe admitted. But now it knows you're not going back. Emily looked down at Axel, who had fallen asleep at her feet. Then let it know this, she whispered. Next time it comes for me, I won't be alone. Emily Harper walked back into her life, like a girl stepping out of a storm shelter after the tornado passed. The sky looked the same. The trees still whispered, but everything felt different. Axel was at her side, his stride steady, head high. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was a piece of her history, one that had waited years to be remembered. The false buses were gone. The shadow in the system had gone dark since the cube was shut down. But the unease lingered, like the silence after a scream. Life didn't exactly return to normal. She didn't go back to school right away. Not because Monroe said she couldn't, but because she needed time. Time to understand what it meant to be a kid who was watched, mirrored, predicted, and who broke the pattern meant to trap her. The government gave her a new ID, sealed her DARPA file, and promised protection if anything reactivated. But Emily knew better. She knew things don't just disappear, they evolve. So she did too. By spring, she was different. Sharper, calmer, not afraid, but aware. She spent more time outside, training Axel again, though really he was training her. They ran together in the mornings, studied scent detection in the afternoons, and by April, Axel was certified again, not as a police K-9, but as her partner. People noticed. Local reporters started asking questions. How did a 13-year-old girl survive something the government wouldn't name? What had the dog seen? Who was Echo, the decoy girl who disappeared as quietly as she came? Emily gave him the same answer every time. He knew. I listened. By summer, Monroe had taken a new post out west. She left Emily with a satellite phone, a coded manual, and a quiet nod. Rodriguez stayed close. He helped Marlene with home repairs, grilled steaks on weekends, and taught Emily how to read thermal signatures on a handheld scanner. They weren't trying to be a family, but they were one. Then, one night in July, the scanner lit up. Emily and Axel were sitting under the stars in the backyard. Fireflies danced near the fence. Crickets hummed. The device beeped once, then again. A frequency ping. Same shape, same pulse pattern. Emily stared at the screen. It's back, she whispered. Axel stood immediately, but this time they didn't run. They didn't hide. She tracked the signal to an empty lot near the abandoned freight station 2 towns, over a place she didn't remember, but Axel did. He led her through the broken gate, past a rusted sign that read property of U.S. Communications Authority, and into a small clearing. There, beneath a collapsed satellite dish, sat an object. It wasn't a bus. It was a cube, like the one they'd shut down months ago, except this one was on. A faint blue light pulsed from inside. Emily approached slowly. No voice came. No screen flickered. Just silence. She reached out her hand. Axel didn't stop her. When she touched the top, the cube opened, not with machinery, but with warmth. Inside was a photo, a printed image of her and Axel, on the day she first met him, long before any of this. She hadn't even known the picture existed. Taped to the back was a note, written in perfect block letters. The pattern ends with choice. You chose. Emily stared at it for a long time. Then she did something Monroe probably wouldn't have approved of. She burned the cube, watched it spark, hiss, and melt into ground until there was nothing left but ash. Some things, she decided, don't need to be studied. They need to be buried. Back in town, people started treating her differently, not like a victim or survivor, but like someone who knew something the rest of them didn't. She never bragged. She never told them what really happened, but she carried herself like someone who had looked into the dark and walked out holding her own name. In August, she stood in front of a microphone at the annual K-9 honor ceremony in front of the town hall. She wore her cleanest jeans, Axel beside her in his new harness. They'd asked her to speak. She cleared her throat. "I don't think you can ever really repay a dog," she said. "They don't ask for much. They don't write you letters, but they remember, even when you forget." She looked down at Axel, who sat tall beside her. "This one remembered me, even when something else tried to replace me, and that made all the difference." She paused. "And if you ever feel like something's watching you or trying to rewrite your story, don't be afraid, because maybe what's really waiting is a second chance to be you again." The crowd clapped. Marlene wiped away a tear. Rodriguez nodded from the back row. Axel barked once, like a stamp on the final page. Now she walks freely. No fear, no fake mirrors. Just her, the real Emily Harper, and the dog who never let her go. Thank you for following Emily and Axel's story. If this journey moved you, we're grateful you came along. Subscribe to K9 Miracle Story to hear more stories of courage that will leave you inspired. Now, let us ask you, if the world tried to rewrite your story, would you know how to fight for the real you? Don't just watch. Join us. Subscribe to K9 Miracle Story for more unforgettable stories of bravery.